Now, after a week of silence and mass deleting tweets, J.K. Rowling is back on Twitter, and the very first post she does was to attack Imane Khelif. It's important to highlight that launching a PR campaign and applying layers of thick makeup requires more time and effort than simply making DNA test results public. Now, what she did there was copy and paste a quote rather than write it in her own words, but it was still attacking Imane for going on a feminizing campaign, and by proxy, calling for her to release a DNA test. Look, she was attacking Imane Khelif again, this time because she had a photo shoot and insinuated that she should show a DNA test. What do you make of the week-long silence of J.K. Rowling, her deleting tweets, her coming back, and then going straight on the attack?
I don't think it's great, Curtis. I think it's honestly, I was talking about this with a pal the other day. We thought that when she went quiet, it was hopefully because she was getting some sort of support or therapy, because it's full delusion. And I know that I have that sometimes with like anyone who's like right wing. I can't comprehend what it takes to be that kind of person, but to be a multi-millionaire who's like richer than the Queen, famously, and then to get online and be like, right, people are trying to sue me. What am I going to do? First thing I'm going to do is just punch down on a non-white woman boxer who's been the subject of like massively invasive questions. Like, there's no logic to it now. I do feel like I started off like laughing about the whole black mold in our house thing. And it's absolutely insane. But it kind of makes me feel like at this point, when Kanye West was doing his whole thing, going absolutely mental and saying all that, like he was clearly in psychosis. And I genuinely feel like her behavior at this stage, not making excuses for it, because she's pushed herself into this insane state. The problem is platforming that voice. Like, people are insane. There's people who say these things, people who have these insane views, or they're in delusional episodes, or they've completely lost touch with reality. But you don't bring them to Parliament and meet with them. And you don't put them on the front page of every newspaper whenever they say something, because that, like, it just really frustrates me that there's like this, that she's horrible. I just don't think that she deserves any kind of visibility anymore, to me. Like, she needs to be, for her own safety and also for everybody else's safety, obviously, which is way more important. She just needs to be not taken seriously.
I remember a time back in the days when J.K. Rowling was quite literally a person who I idolized, where she joined Twitter and she put one tweet out and the fandom went crazy. And it basically said something along the lines of, "This is the real me. However, you won't be hearing much from me because pen and paper are my priority at the moment." And I remember then being like, "Oh my God, J.K. Rowling's tweeted. She's on Twitter. It's actually her. She's tweeted. We want more. We want more. We want more." And all of the fandom were like, "She needs to tweet more. We need to hear more from her. We need to hear more from her." I every time I see her come up, and I don't follow her anymore. I've not followed her for years now, but she always seems to appear top of my timeline whenever I go into Twitter, or X as we're not calling it. And every time I see her now, I just think, I wish pen and paper was a priority again, and she wasn't tweeting, and it makes me really sad because there was so many people. I went, just a little anecdote for you. I went to the opening gala event of Harry Potter and the Cursed Child when it first opened in London, and I actually met J.K. Rowling that day. She signed a book that I've now since sold. And I made some really good friends that day. And one of those, I know he won't mind me telling this story. One of those people that I made friends with was a guy who was also there. He turned up to go to the gala event, and he really wanted to meet J.K. Rowling, who was his idol. And we've stayed in contact since. And this guy's trans, and like, I was devastated when she started with all this nonsense. But for someone like him, who's idolized this woman, had her on this pedestal, really invested in the world that she's created and her as a human being, you know, who went out of his way to meet her at the red carpet. And we sat in Pizza Express at lunchtime afterwards. We'd gone for some food before we went back, and we were both absolutely buzzing because we thought it was this huge, amazing. I mean, they say you shouldn't meet your idols, right? But it was this huge, amazing thing. And he told me about how, you know, when he was struggling with his identity, he could escape in the world that she created, and all this wonderful joy that her words had brought to him.
Mm-hmm.
And now she's constantly on an attack against people like him, who are just trying to live who they are. And this whole thing with Imane Khelif and the way that she's dealt with this, when it came out about a week and a half ago that there was going to be legal action being taken, and J.K. Rowling been named in that when she went quiet, I think many of us thought, thank God, that's the end of this, at least this part of the saga now.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that she's come back a week later, I mean, I don't know if either of you know, but I don't know where this stands legally, because if there's a case against her about comments that she's made, I assume the get out is, well, she didn't make the comment, she just shared what somebody else had said and quoted it. But surely, if it's a cyberbullying case and she's still using a platform of 14 million people to share misinformation, lies, and just sick fucking
Well, I think
quotes
first of all, she's
calling for DNA
clearly a little bit worried about this claim.
Yeah.
Because she did delete loads of tweets, and the thing she comes back with isn't her own words; it is a quote. But she thinks that's
she thinks she's been really clever with that. She thinks like, oh, I've really got around this by bullying this non-white woman.
All that is just more evidence, because what they will do is obviously they'll pile up different examples, and they'll just say, well, okay, well, here's her coming back and, you know, quoting.
But where does that stand legally? Because if she does have legal action being taken against her, how on earth can she reappear after a week and immediately the first thing she tweets be another attack on the very person that's taken legal action against her? Surely there's something to prevent that.
I do think that she's using a kind of white woman tears kind of tactic with it a little bit. And I think the language that she's used in that tweet is very like, well, I didn't say anything. I didn't say anything aggressive. I didn't say that she wasn't female. I just said, wouldn't it be easier to do it this way? Like, it's so passive aggressive. And I think that's what made me so angry when I saw it, was like, how much punching down did you feel like you had to do? How clever did you think you were writing this little tweet? Like, I think and I think she's probably so bloody rich that she feels extremely confident in herself. I'm hoping it goes the Lawrence Fox way.
Well, she's always threatening people with lawyers, isn't she? But
that's the thing. I was going to bring
really
that up. She uses her wealth as a bully. She's bullied so many people who obviously don't have the money to, because our legal system's so geared towards, essentially, if you're rich, it's a game to you. And she's done that a lot. But
I'll tell you what's really telling though, Curtis. There was a genuine convicted rapist that took part in the Olympics this year.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And to my knowledge, and I may be mistaken, there may have been a retweet or something, but to my knowledge, there wasn't a single thing from J.K. Rowling on that point. You've got someone in the Olympics who is a convicted rapist, and she claims to be all about women's rights. She doesn't mention it. But a woman who happens to have the wrong type of hormones in her body, or possibly the wrong type of chromosomes, or, you know, who doesn't quite fit the mold of what she and all her turfs think you need to fit into in order to be defined as a woman. And it's the only thing she talks about for the entire Olympics.
I don't think she's said anything, but even if she's maybe did one retweet, the stories that came out of the Olympics, Imane Khelif was amplified way more than the person's name I can't remember, the one who, you know, rapes that person, right? And it just shows, though, this goes bigger than J.K. Rowling, how the media attention was all talking about Imane Khelif, but not this person who actually committed a crime. Yeah. Now, this is the thing, right? So this isn't even an issue of trans people. This is a cis woman. And I think to sort of touch upon what you said, Sneakcret, about whether she's going through some mental health episode, I don't want to speculate on people's mental health, but I do think this is way different to what Kanye West was going through, because it was clearly a manic episode for him. I think the ideology behind transphobia makes you deluded, and I don't see any evidence that she is going through anything. I mean, look at Graham Linehan. Look at other people,
this
prominent
is-
transphobia.
It's
I
not.
do think this. Sorry.
I was just going to say it's not like we know that J.K. Rowling has got a history of struggling with depression and anxiety alongside that. We know that she's got a history of some really awful experiences with her mental health that I wouldn't wish on anybody, quite frankly. But something else that's been quite telling is that sort of rumors amongst the Harry Potter fandom are that there's been a lot of issues over rights. So, for example, when Cursed Child first came out, it was branded very differently to the films. And then there was suddenly this period, J.K. Rowling disappeared off Twitter. She stopped posting. This was after she'd made her initial comments in 2019, where suddenly there was a big rebrand at Cursed Child, and it had the same font and the same branding as the films. Well, that's Warner Brothers branding. So what they're doing with Sony Friedman Productions, I don't know. But anyway, and there's then been more sort of talk on the town recently. There's a new, they've recently announced a new audiobook series that's going to have a host of different actors voicing the characters. It's also going to be like an immersive audio experience, but it is the audiobooks. And there's a lot of suggestion that this is basically J.K. Rowling doing as much as she possibly can with Harry Potter before she's forced to sell the rights, because allegedly, and I don't know if this is true, so take it with a pinch of salt, but sort of word on the street is that Warner Brothers have basically said, we want to buy the complete rights of Harry Potter because they want to continue with it without having to have her name attached to it, because they're beginning to realize, if they've not completely realized now, how damaging she now is to the brilliant money making thing. And I've seen, as someone that used to be a big sort of follower and supporter of J.K. Rowling, I've seen a pattern in periods where she seems to be a little unhinged online, alongside things happening within sort of the wider world that she's a part of, that she created, that she'd always said would never happen, like more commodification of Harry Potter, things being sold off at stupid prices that she would never have previously agreed to. And I do have to wonder, you know, how much this descent into this rabbit hole has affected her mental health. I mean, we've heard stories, there's been stories of local taxi drivers telling people that all of her family don't speak to her, like the Graham Linehan thing, you know, that like nobody talks to her anymore. Her family have cut her off because of the constant transphobia. And just really quickly on that, the reason that she has to go so hard on Imane Khelif, despite the fact that she's a cis woman, is because if she acknowledges that somebody with XY chromosomes can be a woman, can have a vagina, can have a uterus, can have a womb, then she has to acknowledge that her definition of what a woman is this entire time has been wrong.
Yeah, it's cognitive dissonance, isn't it? I think I've developed like 6 angry thoughts whilst you were talking there from what you're saying that were really interesting. But it's this cognitive dissonance of like, well, if I'm wrong on this, because she said it was the gametes a while back. She was like, it's 100% to do with the gametes. I don't see what the gametes have to do with this conversation. It's because it's a house of cards. Like, talking about biological sex and putting all this weight on it forces you to actually examine what that actually means. And when you actually look at it, there isn't a defining line. So if she then goes, oh no, you're right, there is an exception, all of a sudden. But that also, I think the thing that I really feel strongly about from this is that I think a huge amount of her turning in the way that she has come from the fact that she was on a pedestal as a good person. Like, she was basically a lady who wrote a book about being different, and she got elevated to this status of being this, like, oh, she reached so many people. All these people felt like, wow, this book really understands me. This person understands what it's like to be an outcast. She was like raised up as this, like, she was seen as a really like forward-thinking feminist. Never mind the fact that her book had loads of like racial undertones.
She'd
walk shoulder to shoulder. Never mind her book was like, oh, slavery's okay if the masters are the nice ones. Like, everybody was just like so into her. And I feel like her story is extreme, but there are a lot of situations in which you have these people who are not educated in intersectionality, who don't have a full view of what it is to be progressive, who get elevated to this status. Then all of a sudden they get criticized And it's literally, it's like a little tiny human part of you that's like, well, I don't want to be criticized, and I can't handle the amount of criticism that I'm getting. So I'm literally not going to see you as a person anymore.
It's deeper than that, though, because she's always been criticized. I mean, she talks very openly about how many people used to burn
but not
books.
by her fans. Her fans
she's
loved
being
her.
criticized by the very people like me. On this wall behind me where that painting is now, there was a time when I literally had a flipping photograph of her with a quote in on my wall.
Did it say live, laugh, love?
No, it said it's
I hate trans women.
It was about the fact that you have to basically,
Dumbledore was gay.
You can't go through life without failing at things unless you know. The quote is, "It's impossible to live without failing at something unless you live so cautiously that you might as well not have lived at all, in which case you fail by default." But there was a time when people like me, like I'm massively guilty of this, and all right, I was young, I blame that partly, but there were so many others who, like me, would look to her as almost as a moral compass. In fact, I think I once said, I think I once even uttered the sentence or a variation of this. Basically, if J.K. Rowling says it, then it's the right thing because she's the perfect example of a moral. Got
to remove that tattoo. No,
And
but you're right.
like,
but this is what I mean. It's like people who are progressive and well-intentioned getting put on pedestals like that. This is like we see it with loads of internet commentators all the time. There's a huge problem with white leftists at the minute talking about Palestine, and then all of a sudden starting to say all this anti-black rhetoric. Like, if you're not a person who's educated on a topic, but you're put forward as the bastion of that thing, and then you get criticized. The thing that is so scary with liberals in particular is it's real easy for them to just go, "Oh, I've been criticized. You've actually hurt my feelings. Now I'm going to go be a racist a transphobe."
That's exactly. You're so right there. A lot of people do that. When they get criticised, they actually double down, and it pushes them into a more reactionary position. I mean, Graham Linehan is an example of that. Someone criticised him for something, and
now he only makes money by talking about that.
Right.
And JK only makes money for that.
I fucked up, or this is a bit wrong. They end up doubling down. But to sort of go back to more of the actual...
Oh, yeah, sorry.
No, it's fine. To go to the content of what she has been saying and what transphobes have been saying, is that this now veers into misogyny because, I mean, it's always there's always a background of misogyny and transphobia, but it's more overt now because now what we have is essentially Imane Khelif doesn't fit the typical woman and now we must transvestigate her, or saying, now she's not a woman. But that's misogynistic because what you're trying to say, you have to be a Eurocentric kind of person, you have to have a certain beauty standard to be considered a cis woman now, because before TERFs would say the definition of a woman is an adult human female and they have female reproductive parts. Okay, well, Imane Khelif, I mean, not to get into it too much in terms of the private parts, has female reproductive parts, but suddenly that's now not good enough to be considered a cis woman. So it seems like the TERFs don't know what a woman is, and by doing that, they're actually extremely misogynistic.
But we've been saying this from the beginning because the TERFs have always had, they always, on the outside, they always claim, you know, well, all if you're an adult human female, you're a woman, and women can be butch, and women can be this, and women can have short hair, and women can have body hair, and women can fit this mold. But then it's always interesting, isn't it, how those are the women that get attacked. I mean, how many stories have we read of cis women being hounded out of women's bathrooms in recent years because another woman who is a TERF has wrongly identified them as actually being trans? It's similar to what's happened here with the Olympics, actually, you know, and hounded them and told them they have no right to be in the bathroom because they've got muscles and they look a bit more masculine. Like, TERF ideology is inherently misogynistic and is
white supremacist as well.
Yeah, it is.
But it goes back to what J.K. Rowling was saying. Well, you know, I'm here to defend women, but you are attacking cis women now because of your hatred for trans people. Like, transphobia spills into everywhere, and you can see it doesn't just confine itself to trans people. It starts to spill into every aspect
But
of.
she would argue that this is proof that she's not transphobic, because she's made the argument that her issue has always been about women's safety, and that she knows that Imane Khelif isn't trans, because some people claimed at the time she was. J.K. Rowling never actually made that claim, but other people did.
She's
And
not
she
trans.
knows that she knows that
Right.
she's not trans, but
that's
she
the point,
believes
isn't
that
it?
but she believes that she's a man. And it's the fact that it's a man committing violence against women. I mean, Rosie Duffield, don't get me fucking started, still has that bloody header on a Twitter account, unless it's changed in the last 24 hours, saying, 2024, the year that male violence against women became an Olympic sport. Why is she in the Labour Party?
Oh, that's really annoying. I didn't know that she'd done that.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, and her profile picture is like the same thing. This is an elected official in our country. And I
When
think
you're a
this
boxer and
problem
someone boxes you.
is that J.K. Rowling has made
Let's
it
talk about that as the violence.
has made it so mainstream for people to have this point of view that I mean, Rosie Duffield's one of the reasons why I left the Labour Party, or more the failure of the Labour Party to deal with her transphobia. But we've got elected politicians literally still making the claim that what we saw in that boxing match was male violence against women, which I think, and I mean, Sneakcret, please tell me if I'm exaggerating here, as I'm a man saying this, but I think that that's a fucking insult to any victim of domestic violence and any woman who is a victim of male violence, because that is not what we saw at the Olympics.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you've got what was it the other day? It's like 20% of all police reported crime in the UK is violence against women and girls. Like, it's classified as violence against women and girls. And it's like, no, but don't look at the men doing the violence against the women and girls. Look at this boxer who we don't think looks very feminine. Instead, like, it's so intrinsically tied into white supremacy and all of these other sort of structures. This idea that I think I was talking to someone the other day about it. It's like, it's an excuse to just find any way possible to not ask men to deal with their shit. It's like, oh, we've got problems with women being attacked. Well, let's blame trans people, or let's blame the immigrants. Maybe they're the ones doing the misogyny. Like, no, they're not. They're not the ones doing the misogyny.
This is kind of what I was saying, how transphobia kind of spills into different aspects, and you start to see the biggest transphobes end up being extremely reactionary on a whole host of other things. I mean, they tried to
the Alliance Defending Freedom.
I mean, they tried to paint themselves as, oh, I'm really, really progressive on everything. It's just this particular issue of trans people. But it's not. You always find out that actually it poisons the rest of their viewpoints, and they're extremely reactionary. And you can see it starts to come out from this.
Yeah.
Because I think it fundamentally gets to the point of what is misogyny. And I would like to see, I mean, for Rosie Duffield, for example, I would like her to talk about austerity, how austerity impacts everybody, but it disproportionately impacts women, and especially women of colour. If you care so much about these people, then why aren't you angry at the Labour Party for supporting austerity, for supporting public cuts, these sorts of things?
I'm just getting her. Yeah. So still, as of right now, I'm
gonna get really angry.
We've got this is the header. So 2024, the year that male violence against women became an Olympic sport, right? And then we've got a picture. I can't remember the name of the.
Love it if she talks about the actual violence against women that's happening literally now, all the time.
I can't remember the name. I can't remember the name of the boxer, but the opponent that Imane Khelif was against, I think, first, who sort of batted out after literally about 30 seconds.
And I'm pretty sure that
Very surprised about getting hit.
she had a broken nose going into the fight as well.
We've got a picture of her. This is Rosie Duffield's profile picture on Twitter, right? 2024, women should be fighting for medals, not survival. With a picture of the
lady who made it to the Olympics and played for 43
Carini.
seconds and then got hit once and then quit.
Angela Carini, I can't remember her name.
Who bless her, had to then come out and make like a public declaration that she didn't actually have anything against Imane Khelif, and that she didn't agree
stressed
with
out by all the other stuff.
And this is now, what are we on, the 25th of August? The Olympics are done and over with. And Rosie Duffield's retweeting stuff as of 10 hours ago, and that is still her. This is the public facing appearance of one of our elected officials, And it's just if nothing else, it's just not even true. You know, the year male violence against women became an Olympic sport. Well, no, it didn't.
It's also worth
This
pointing
woman
out
hit
that
this woman in a boxing match.
this whole manufactured controversy came.
Sorry,
from
I get mad about this one.
I could see.
Came from the manufactured controversy came from the fact that there was one test where Imane Khelif and another boxer failed. Right. However, it turns out that particular test was from a Russian company, and it turned out that person lost. I think Imane Khelif beat a Russian boxer, right? And suddenly after that, they retrospectively looked at the test because they didn't flag up the test before. So that she was allowed to fight in the World Championships, right? So she apparently passed this test, beat this Russian boxer. So then the Russian Federation or whoever owns the I think it's sorry, I'm not that clued up on this issue, but retrospectively looked at this test and said, oh, actually, she failed now because it's clearly corruption. But basically, Russia, their fighter lost against Imane Khelif, so we tried to disqualify her and to support our own boxer. So they just said, oh, well, she had something wrong with the test. And I say
She
something
failed the
wrong
gender
because
test.
she failed essentially the gender test, and they still wouldn't actually release the results. So people have been asking questions about this specific test because some people say, oh, she's got XY chromosomes. We actually don't know that because none of the results have been released. We don't even know, and they won't release it, which to me signals there's probably even nothing wrong with this test. But they just used this specific test because a Russian fighter lost to Imane Khelif. Now that story got picked up, and that was a couple of years ago. Since then, Imane Khelif has passed all tests. She passed tests beforehand as well. No issue. But this one little story was shared, and I'm sure it's amplified by Elon Musk. And that's where this controversy came from.
But
and it just
also,
shows that
failing-
any cis woman can be a target by transphobes.
Yeah.
Can I say one
failing
more
the
thing
gender
on this?
test
Sorry.
Sorry, just quickly, really quickly. Sorry if I made failing a gender test. I think this is important. Doesn't
It's
mean
the IBA. That was it,
but
sorry.
it doesn't mean that the test results have shown that you're not the gender you say you are. It's literally a test to determine whether you meet the criteria in order to compete in that gender category within the sport. So any cis woman who has a level of testosterone that is too high will fail a gender test. But no one's saying that they're
Doesn't
not
make
a
them
woman.
not a woman. Yeah,
Exactly.
I mean, it is
Correct me.
used, but it is used against women of color all the time. Like that's
Yes.
where it comes across most often. I think that is a really good point. Like the idea that like the calling it a gender test is just ridiculous in and of itself. I have a serious thing and then I have a silly thing to lighten the mood after the serious thing. On the serious side of it, like I think something that does concern me about it, you know how with the racist attacks, like these riots, the stand up to racism stuff came out, and then it was like, great, well, look at us, we've pushed back and we fixed racism now. And it was like, because it's just these racist thugs that are the issue. It concerns me that rhetoric is similar to what we're seeing with this Imane Khelif thing of like, it's how dare you, because she's not actually trans, she's cis. And whilst that does expose a massive issue in the logic of the transphobes, like if she was trans and she'd passed those tests, if her testosterone levels weren't of a certain level, it also wouldn't matter. And I think a lot of people in the conversation, I've like made videos about it, and most of the time my audience are very like left wing, but I've had people commenting on those videos being like, and actually she's not even like, it's like, oh, but if she was trans, then obviously this would all be justified, and it's not. And I'm very nervous about, again, this liberal thing that's happening of like trying to box off these issues as like, it's just in this circumstance. Look, we've actually defended women by saying that this one woman was cis. She did pass the gender test in our hearts, but if she had been trans, then obviously all of this would have been warranted. So I think that's just like a concerning thing that's kind of looming on me. The silly thing was, I actually would far prefer if we didn't do any tests on people to compete in the Olympics. I want to see like the absolute epitome of human fitness in everything. I think they should be allowed to take as many performance enhancing drugs as they want to.
How good would that be?
I want to see people like jacked to foot, like throwing cars and stuff. I don't know what sport that would be. I'm not big
Olympics
on
on
sports.
steroids.
They
Quite
actually should do
I
like
want
a
to see the
separate
peak.
one, though. There should be a separate one where it's like no drugs, and then there should be take any drugs you want, and it will be like
just
the
go
Avengers
crazy.
fighting each other.
I want to like Greek god
I would
style
watch that.
because we're like, what's the thing? Oh, we've got you can't have trans women in sports because then they'll have a biological advantage. What sports? Is sports a taking part thing? Like, no, it's literally all about like tell basketball. What do you think's happening there?
Well, actually, I'm going to compete in the swimming in LA. I'm just putting that out there because I've not been in the swimming baths for probably about 3 years, but I'm definitely going to go and compete because it's just the taking part, right?
It's about taking part, and they'll make sure that everybody else in the competition has the same exact physical strength as you, because otherwise it wouldn't be fair.
Yeah,
And then
everyone would be
gets the
attacking
exact
you.
same. Everyone gets the exact same result.
And you have to go the same
no
speed.
Winners or losers.
This is communism.
This is sport communism.
Wait a minute. I want to see people go crazy. It would be way more fun and way less transphobic. That's my solution. That's the silly one.
Maybe you can start a new sports event then that's all around that.
Just doing loads of drugs.
Yeah.
I'm excited to say that Turn Left has significantly grown this year, and with that, we've managed to produce far more ambitious content, interviewing high-profile people. We did a 12-hour live election show. There are multiple people behind Turn Left, but we are still working around our full-time work. But we would love it if this was our full-time. It means we could dedicate so much more and to bring even more ambitious content. So if you've been here from the beginning, or you've only recently become a viewer, if you like what we do, then you can help us out. Please like and share this video. Make sure you drop a comment. We want to hear your thoughts. We want to hear your feedback. And we desperately need more independent media. If you want to see a socialist media alternative thrive, then you could be part of that. So if you can, you could support us on Patreon for £3 or £5 per month, or any one-off donation. We can use that money to upgrade our equipment, to rent out a proper studio, and to start paying ourselves. This is only the beginning. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Patreon.com, Turn Left Media. Support independent media. Support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you, Turn Left.